Hi everyone, it's me, Ella, and welcome back to my channel. Happy New Year to you all. I hope you've all had a lovely Christmas and a fantastic New Year. As you will know, I am still a little bit behind on some videos and I'm trying my very best to catch up throughout the next few uploads. So, today's review video is going to be all about Here and Now, the Steps musical, when I went to go and see it in Nottingham back in November. So, let's jump into it. Here and Now, the Steps musical is a show that I had heard a lot about before even booking tickets to see it. Steps were huge in my childhood, so I already knew of the group, who they were, and some of their most famous songs. When I'd found out that they had written a musical and that it was going on tour, I thought, oh brilliant, a Steps musical, I would really like to go and see that. And I did have quite high expectations for it as well. A couple of weeks before Here and Now was announced to go on tour, I heard that the show had been very successful during its initial run in Birmingham, and I was rather intrigued to get tickets and see what it was all about. A couple of weeks later down the line, I heard that Gabriella Slade, the costume designer for Six, had also designed the costumes for Here and Now, the Steps musical. I was very excited about this and certainly very eager to see more of Gabriella's stunning costumes in action on stage. Okay, now that we've had a little bit of background knowledge, let's get into reviewing the actual show. The storyline of Here and Now, the Steps musical, personally, was quite difficult for me to follow because you had a character in love with another character, and then another character in love with another character, and then another character in love with another character, and so on, meaning we kind of had this vicious love triangle going round and round in circles and repeating itself, where it got to the point that it was very difficult for me to keep track of who was in love with who as the show went on. And because it was set up in this kind of way, it took me about, I'm going to guess, 40 minutes to get into the story and get the gist of what was happening on stage, and normally it would take me about 15-20 minutes. Despite the plot and storyline of Here and Now taking double the time than usual for me to actually understand, the good news is that there was a step song literally every 5 minutes, and if it weren't for the songs, I would have really struggled to follow along with the story. And I believe the step songs are what saved the show and kept the audience spirits very high indeed throughout the performance. Right, so now that we've covered the storyline, I now want to get into the creative side of the show, starting with a couple of very clever things that I noticed about the set. First of all, if you've seen the show before, you will know that the shop or the beach superstore that features in the show, where all the characters work at, you will know that that shop is called Better Best Bargains, which is a nod to the Steps song Better Best Forgotten, which I thought was very clever. And then also the aisle numbers. Now, I think if you know Steps, you'll know where this is going, but the aisle numbers on stage as part of the shop were actually aisles 5, 6, 7 and 8, which is obviously a nod to 5, 6, 7, 8, which I thought was, again, very, very clever. And that definitely brought a smile to my face. If you see the show, you will definitely notice a lot of hidden Steps references, which I really, really enjoyed. The costumes for Here and Now, the Steps musical, as I said earlier, were designed by Gabriella Slade, who is also the costume designer for Six and also worked on the Share Show UK tour a couple of years ago. Going into Here and Now, the Steps musical, having seen Gabriella's work before, I was obviously expecting the most sparkliest costumes I ever did see in a similar style to what I've I've seen her do before with Six and the Cher Show. However, I was pleasantly surprised by Gabriella's costume design on this, because even though there were elements of sparkle throughout the show with her costumes, it was very, very nice to see Gabriella do something a little different with Here and Now, which was lovely. I really enjoyed seeing the different costumes that were on display throughout the performance, and it's just nice to see something different, isn't it? Every now and then, I suppose. When I said about sparkle, goodness me, there was one character in the show who, I can't remember the character's name, but there was one character in the show played by River Medway from RuPaul's Drag Race, who was wearing pretty much the most sparkliest costumes I ever did see throughout the entire thing, and I could definitely tell that this was reminiscent of Gabriella's previous work. And right at the end of the show, for the encore, the whole cast were in fact wearing some very, very sparkly costumes. I knew Gabriella would bring in the sparkle somewhere, and for Steps it turned out that even though it was a bit in and out throughout the show, just with that one character, it turns out that right at the end, everybody was in full-blown classic Gabriella Slade sparkle, which I really enjoyed. Gabriella has done a truly fantastic job designing the costumes for Here and Now, the Steps musical. I absolutely loved the wonderful array of different costumes on display, and funnily enough, seeing Gabriella's work does not end there, because at the back end of this year, in November, I am going to see Paddington at the Savoy, Paddington the musical, which Gabriella has also designed the costumes for. So it will be brilliant to see even more of Gabriella's wonderful work on display at the back end of this year. I am very excited to find out what she has done with the costumes for Paddington, but her work on Steps was absolutely fantastic and a pleasure to see. And finally, I want to turn our attention to the cast of Here and Now, the Steps musical, in particular Lara Denning. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, you will recognise that name and probably find it very familiar, as I saw Lara Denning as Anne 3 times on the Anne Juliet UK tour last year, once in Leicester and then twice in Nottingham. If you would like to see my Anne Juliet videos, they are on my channel if you are interested. Anyway, the role of Kaz originally was down to be played by Rebecca Locke, who was the original Miss Fleming in Heathers, and Rebecca left Here and Now just before Nottingham, so I had unfortunately just missed her by the skin of my teeth, as she left the show when it finished its run in Wimbledon, which was literally the week before Nottingham. However, when I saw that Lara Denning was going to be the replacement Kaz, I knew that following her performances in Anne Juliet, if they were anything to go by, that I would be in for an absolute treat. And I was absolutely right. Kaz is a complete character contrast to Anne. However, Lara's fierce vocals did not disappoint. Her renditions of those step songs were amazing. I really, really enjoyed Lara's performance, and she brought the character of Kaz to life in her own way, which I really, really enjoyed. The whole cast were absolutely fantastic. Taking everything into account and given everything that I have said about Here and Now, the Steps musical, my final review for the show is a solid 4 stars. A complex but enjoyable show that I am sure all Steps fans will love and delight in. I am aware that the show is in fact coming to Leicester in May, but I will not be double booking and seeing the show more than once. Rest assured though that I have had a wonderful time seeing the show in Nottingham and I really enjoyed it. And on that note, this review for Here and Now, the Steps musical has come to an end. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I shall see you this weekend for another very exciting 6 sing-along vlog, the first sing-along of 2026. I shall see you then. Bye!